Do you want to go over these first?
Yeah.
And kind of line out a method to our madness?
Nah.
Welcome to Barrage. I'm Matt. There's Zach, back for a second round of a comic review. These are fun.
So far.
So we're going to do Saga.
Yes.
One of your favorites.
Absolutely.
Huge, has tons of awards under its belt. Brian K Vaughan.
Mm-hmm.
Fiona Apple. Fiona Apple does not illustrate it at all. It's Staples.
Staples? Staples?
Under Image Comics.
One of the reasons why I wanted to do this is actually the 6th trade paperback is going to be dropping in July.
Okay.
So that's coming up pretty soon, and kind of I thought this would be a good time to talk about it, celebrate it a little bit,
Right.
and see if we can get some new readers in.
Now, what I did read was it is the Star Wars.
For perverts.
I read that too.
That's how the creator labeled it, Star Wars for perverts. I think the reason why people compare it to that is because of things that Brian has said as using Star Wars as an inspiration. He started writing and creating this universe on all of these worlds when he was very, very young. And he's cited Star Wars as like a really strong influence for many years. But in terms of its similarities, no, I don't know that I would necessarily say that either.
Right.
But at its core, it's about a family trying to survive.
Oh, we didn't give a spoiler yet. If you're going to read Saga, stop watching, because we're going to give spoilers.
Yeah, I was going to say not only stop watching, but go read immediately.
Right. Well, let's start where the comic starts, birth.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what sets the tone, because it's a story narration of their daughter.
Mm-hmm.
What's her name?
Hazel.
Hazel. Because of her eyes? Because her eyes, they mentioned something with her eyes.
You know, I don't remember. It's been a little while since I read the first one.
Damn it!
Like my favorite part about when they're naming her though is
it was fun.
They're trying to come up with it, and he's like, Hope, and she's like, nope, I don't want my child to be a representative symbol for anything. I want my child to be my child.
Right.
This is my baby. We're not going to make her anything more than what she is. The overall plot essentially revolves around a war and several proxy wars. Kind of diving deep into the history that is kind of alluded to over the series, there is a planet called Landfall, which is fairly technologically advanced. Its inhabitants are entirely humanoid with one distinguishing characteristic, which is they tend to have wings. At some point, a war was started with the inhabitants of the moon of Landfall, and that moon is called Wreath. Defining characteristic to the inhabitants of Wreath are they have horns. We're talking about a wide variety of appendages that are reflected throughout nature as we know it. Ram's horns, elk horns, like a really wide variety. Same with wings. Some of them have insect wings, butterfly wings, like bird wings, obviously.
The moon Wreath is very nature-driven.
It's a magic-based culture. Yeah.
Magic, yes.
Yeah. At some point in their past history, they kind of start fighting with each other over something. But what they both realized over time is that the planet and the moon have a symbiotic relationship, and if you can entirely decimate one or the other, it will bring doom on the other. So over time, these wars then spell out into proxy wars where other planets in the galaxy or the universe will essentially take a side. Now, the war itself, I don't think is the plot. It's the thing that our two kind of star-crossed lovers are running from. Our guy is an inhabitant of Wreath. His lady is a native from Landfall, and essentially he is a prisoner of war, and she is a guard in a war camp, and over time they kind of fall in love. Then they escape and have a baby.
Of course they do.
Right. What's really interesting is one of the things that kind of draws them together is a book, and this book essentially is kind of a treatise on two different species who should be fundamentally opposed, finding common ground and coming together, and they kind of both read the same thing into it and find that they actually have a lot in common. He is like a legitimate badass. He is a seriously destructive soldier. At some point, he's called a force of nature by someone, but he has also over time turned into a pacifist. She just wants nothing to do with the war, not necessarily because she's a pacifist, but I think mostly because she's lazy and just isn't interested in doing work for someone else that isn't about art or culture or seeing new things. And so they kind of make a run for it.
Why is everyone searching for them so hard?
So essentially what it ends up being is neither side wants the knowledge of this love child between the two opposing forces to get out, because they feel like it could seriously derail the war effort, which at this point is a full-fledged industry. There's a lot of commentary on military propaganda and how it's used to assert certain governmental agendas. These two people that are really trying to do nothing but survive are leaving a lot of destruction in their wake as these two very powerful governments come after them and try and capture and or kill them. The core of this comic is so fundamentally about these three people and their family dynamic, and I think that's the thing for me that really sets it apart.
It's different.
Yeah, and in that way it actually breaks some old comic book tropes. All of these people are growing up with you. So Hazel, the baby, over the 3 or 4 years that this comic book has been running now, has been growing up with us. People don't really do anything like that with any kind of longevity. Every now and again there are some like mini-series that go on that try and capture the passing of time, because it's really hard to do in a comic book format, especially one that's released on a monthly basis. What they'll do is essentially squeeze a month's worth of action into, or I say squeeze, stretch it across, say 6 months, and then cap off that 6-month run of comic books with, well, that happened then, let's bring you up to speed now. And then the next month, the continuity in the comic book is 6 months ahead, and everyone's kind of grown up a little bit. And it means you have to kind of fill in some gaps with your imagination. It doesn't spell a lot of stuff out for you, and it doesn't hold your hand. But I like that. I appreciate that. And I like that Brian K Vaughan treats his audience with a lot of respect and expects us to get there on our own, which I think is good.
Let's talk a little bit about Fiona.
I mean, she's obviously done other stuff prior to Saga, but for me, her work on Saga is her at the top of her game. I've never seen any artwork quite like it. Her character designs are amazing, and as we kind of alluded to earlier, the two kind of main races have animalistic traits. What I love, though, is how she combines the traits of the two, and you see some wonderful expressions on the faces of some of our characters, really accentuated by some of their animalistic traits. So she uses ears as like a really remarkably expressive device. Ears don't really kind of convey a lot of emotion or expression in humans because they're immobile.
Right.
But if you basically give some guy goat ears or dog ears, and you
put
think
them
of
back and
or raise them up when they're alert and all kinds of stuff,
Yeah,
it's really fascinating, and I love it. It's great. But she also does wonderful things with motion and conveying emotion based on character or body types and styles.
Okay.
And it's just small little things that really contribute to kind of pulling you into the story and pulling you into the art. These are the smaller details that I want the best artist in the industry to get right all the time, and she nails it. So along with her attention to detail for things that I think are really great are some of the kind of her broader art style. The lines are really, really clean. Her style is kind of almost reminiscent of an animation style where often the foreground is kind of, the background is kind of blurry, but the foreground is really crisp, really clean, really, really nicely colored. Fiona's art in Saga is really, it's very visceral. It's really kind of coming at you. I think it's just really stimulating, like really visually interesting, and I really like it. And she does all of the art. So she does not just the penciling, but obviously the inking and all of the coloring as well. Yeah, and we got to mention, like, her coloring is on point. There's a wonderful scene where our two lovers are kind of falling asleep, and in 4 panels their expressions maybe changed very, very slightly, but their body positions don't. But the way that she colors those panels really indicates the passage of time really nicely.
You mentioned lettering, and I noticed it, without noticing it.
Yeah, and this is again a kind of another convention that it breaks with. A lot of comic books do kind of all caps. If you really wanted a consistent product, you can still give it a hand-lettered feel, but make it consistent because it's electronically done or typed or what have you, digitally. Fiona kind of went a different way with the lettering in the comic book. And when our normal characters talk, it's a mixture of upper and lowercase to kind of give a sense of rhythm and pacing, and to kind of pull back on some of the urgency that you get from all caps lettering from traditional comics. They wanted to move away from that. The lettering is portrayed in the same way that you and I would type, like a polite, nice note to each other. But then there are two other font types that we see on a fairly frequent basis. One is the font of the narrator, and to begin with, the narrator is a baby.
That's narrator for English-speaking people.
That thing, yeah. And it's kind of sloppy, and it kind of looks like the writing of a child, and it's great because it kind of helps put you in that headspace. And then
I love it.
On the flip side of that, you also have another kind of race of characters who are the robots, or the royal robots, who have TV screens for heads.
Yeah.
Which is an amazing concept, and it's really well executed, and I love it. But even their lettering is different, and it kind of looks, it's more blocky. You kind of feel like it's a little more computer-ish.
Right.
And when you combine it with the language that they use, it's definitely a little colder, it's a little more formal, and the actual font and lettering contributes to that as well. So no one really talks about the letter, but it's done so impactfully and so well in this comic that it's worth calling out for sure. Yeah, and it's one of those magic things where it helps contribute to your point of mind without you knowing that you're being manipulated. And that's for me, like, that's fundamentally good art, is you're being manipulated and you don't know it. The reason why Saga is so compelling for me is because it's a family-driven story, and it's really about these three people fighting to survive, which I think in many ways is something that a lot of us can relate to.
Zach, is there anything you want to add?
As always, I encourage you guys to check out the source material. The comic book is great. It is recommended for mature readers, so do kind of keep that in mind.
That it is.
It's not appropriate for kids.
No, it's not.
Visit your local comic book store, support your local business. ComicShopLocator.com should do it for you. Just plug in your zip code and it should pull up all your closest comic book stores.
Cool. Thanks, Zach. Thanks for watching. And remember, if you like us, don't forget to subscribe and share us with your nerdy friends.